Okay. All right, good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, September 20th Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get me the church giggle.
Well, I looked, the guy was completely sideways. I didn't know what that was.
All right, I do not have any announcements this evening. Is there anybody here for anything that's not currently listed on our agenda? Seeing as none, I will go right into our first agenda item, which is the public hearing for a poll petition on West Street and possible votes. And I would like to
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so we have somebody here from Mass Electric. So, and this is for National Grid to install one JO pole on West Street, beginning at a point approximately 40 feet south of the center line of the intersection of West and Grove, and installing one pole on West Street, pole number 28-84. Is that about right?
Sounds about right to me.
Taking away one of our unique roads or navigational points in
Yeah.
town. Is that how we should spin that, John?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, the island up off of Rydell, that one.
Yeah, the bent pole.
Now, how are we going to give directions moving forward?
Maybe we'll put it
All I do is I alternate each time I'm going to take a left. Sometimes I go around it, sometimes.
I thought that was a DUI checkpoint. If you hit it, you're drunk.
And this will just be a guying pole too. It's no wires on it. It's just to pull that existing pole 28 back.
Is there a fire hydrant there?
correct.
Any concerns about that getting lost in the,
No, because the pole will still be there in the island, but the bent pole will be gone, I assume.
oh,
This is a guy wire pole, if I'm right.
Correct. Guy wire.
Okay.
Well, 'cause when we met out there, I thought you were going to take that out completely and pull it across
It's not the way you wrote it out.
16, no?
I think it'll just put more of an angle between
No?
29 and 27.
Okay.
So, and the butters have been notified, nobody's here to speak against this,
I'm
or?
not sure who's up on the screen.
Does anyone that's attending virtually have anything to say regarding the poll petition?
No, sir.
make a motion to close the public hearing? Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody wish to entertain a motion on approving the poll petition as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Now, what are we to do without the bent pole? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, on that, I just wanted to be clear what I was talking about. At one point, we met out there with Grid, and this was in connection with the development proposal for that open field that's on that other side from the fire station on Rydell. And the notion was that pole would be removed completely. The line of sight would be straightened up Rydell, and the new pole would be probably on Ms. Gio's property next to the dead tree.
Are you talking about the Main Street end? Mm-hmm. They're talking about.
Oh, this is the other
This is the
end?
West
the
Street
opposite
end.
That's why I'm all
Yep,
messed up.
Yep,
Yeah, the other side
The
of the Fun
opposite.
Island.
yep.
Because they're both
Yes.
dangerous poles.
Yeah, they're both not in great spots, but
Yep.
I think the one,
You're up on West Street and Rydell? Yeah, I get it.
the one on Main Street, if that one disappeared, I wouldn't be sad about it at
Well,
all.
it's got to go. That's why I was concerned that they had changed their plan, but suppose I should take more time to look at the map.
Last year.
Yeah,
I thought, then it stopped because of that development.
maybe we can paint arrows on it so we can at least get people to keep traffic on one side or the other, because that's always confusing. All right,
You could just put a giant fork there. That's been done.
I'm down for that.
A fork in the road, get it?
Fork in the road, yeah. All right, so we have the Highway Department 2022, 2023 proposed plow rates and possible votes. Mr. Furno?
Good evening, everyone. As in the past few years, getting harder and harder to retain our plow subcontractors, so speaking with Mr. Wojcik and you folks the last few years, we've been mirroring the state, Mass DOT state plow rates, and that's why I'm here tonight, because in your packet, you'll see a letter that I got from Mass DOT saying that they're raising rates approximately 20%. I know that's a big jump. Talking with, I'll say, Uxbridge, they're going to do the same thing, plus give a sign-on bonus. I'm not asking for the sign-on bonus, but I am asking if we could consider raising the rates by the 20% as in the packet. Fuel's still up. A lot of my guys use diesel. Gas has come down some, but diesel hasn't come down much at all. And everything else in the economy, parts and what have you, I think this raise is warranted. I want to keep the good group of guys we have. I know of 2 out of my subs that won't be coming back. One unfortunately passed away and one is retired. So I'd like to keep the same group we have, and if we keep the rates married with Mass DOT, it makes them not want to run away and go plow for another town.
Yeah, I saw the state DOT rates, that was a big jump.
Right, and that's basically what I have in front of me. It's about 20%. So on their chart, which I did not share with you folks, but, that's what we'll be paying our 4 different divisions of sizes of trucks that we use.
With this, you think you can get enough subcontractors to?
I believe so. I don't believe I'll lose other than the 2 I have. I'm pretty sure, I did a early survey that most of the guys will come back.
Makes sense to me, with the cost of just doing repairs alone has escalated quite a bit.
I can speak personally on the diesel price, it's not fun.
Yeah, it has not really come down.
Come on, you drive a Subaru.
I do now.
Make a motion that we approve the proposed rates presented in our packet regarding snow removal for the 2022-2023 snow season.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing is none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
So John, salt is up, right?
Salt is up, so I have we share our salt bid with, I believe it's 18 other towns. And Shrewsbury does all the legwork for us, which is nice, So salt prices have gone up 15%. Last year, we paid $62.20 per ton. This year, we're paying $71.82 per ton. That's on, we have 2 bids out there, because in the winter of 14-15, when we had all that snow, we couldn't get salt. So the group got together and said, let's have 2 bids, someone for 70%, someone for 30%. That way there, we've always got a backup. So we have to buy salt 70% from the winning bidder, 30% from the runner-up. The runner-up, their price went up 30%, from $64.50 to $85.90 for a ton of salt, which that's a lot of money, but it's just mirroring the economy, unfortunately, A round of salt this year is probably going to cost us somewhere around $9,200 for 1 round of salt for the whole town.
Just rubbing salt in our wounds.
Oh, sign them up.
Well played,
It'll be one of those nights.
But by way of reference, so when we do the operating budget for fiscal '24, we've been on this path now of trying to increase our operating budget snow and ice account so that we take less from free cash for overruns. So this year, just to keep up with the same quantity of activity, we'd have to bring the budget up 15, 20%. So just, that number will probably go up.
We taking bets on how brutal the winter's gonna be?
Ugh,
Is that locked in for the season?
it is.
Because they have rumors about fuel charges going up pretty high for the rest of the year.
Yeah, we're locked in right to July 1 with this price.
That's all I had. I just wanted to
Sure.
flag that.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John.
I don't suppose we'll see a 20% reduction
That's
next year, right?
Probably not.
No?
Can you give that to Kevin? You want to put it in a football form or something?
You could read it, it's not secret. I didn't have a chance before the meeting.
I didn't read it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next is the on-call, Highway Department on-call policy second read. Have there been any changes since the first read?
Yes, there has.
Yeah.
Jean made her
Page 3.
changes.
Terms and conditions, section D. It's in red.
That was just to get alignment with the payroll period.
Okay. So we can go to number 4, the Police Department FY23 Support and Incentive Grant Acceptance and Possible Votes.
So as you know, Mr. Chairman, the Finance Director recommends that the Select Board take an explicit vote to accept grant funds when they come in. And that is what is here. This is a routine, more or less routine annual grant. So it's our 911 support and incentive grant from the Police Department. We typically use this for part-time salaries and overtime for dispatchers that are associated with the 911 service. And really has been about the same amount of money every single year. So this year it's $34,684.
Make a motion to gladly accept the state 911 grant in the amount of $34,684.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, I have been asked to pass over agenda items number 5 and 6, which brings us...
Will we have an opportunity in executive section to talk about 6?
Yeah, because it's on yours.
Yes.
It's on your agenda.
Which brings us to number 7, ARPA discussion and possible votes. We have the discussion for the bus for the Adult Social Center. We have Patrice here this evening. Come on up, Patrice.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in.
Sure.
So on our last meeting, we had discussed in potentially using ARPA funds to secure the purchase of a bus for the Adult Social Center. Sorry, is it Adult Social
Yes,
Center?
you're getting there.
You're getting better.
Finally got it.
Yeah.
There were some questions from the Select Board, so
Yeah.
glad to have you here this evening.
I have prepared a narrative and gave it to Lisa, so you have a packet of all the information I was able to obtain on the previous bus, stats from the bus that's being used currently, and all the surrounding towns that have transportation of their own. So,
So it was $1,200 in '08, 8,000, but only 2,700 expended in '09, 1,700 in 2010. And then 4,500 budgeted, but 45,1962 spent, and then 6,300, and then 8,096 spent.
so I had to use the annual report because we don't have any records at the center, and neither did Sutton, based on how much the driver was paid, how many hours the driver worked, what the insurance, she didn't have anything. This is from 2007, and the bus was gone in 2012. The only thing I could figure out when I talked to the director is that 2012, it seemed to be a really big repair year. And according to our former selectwoman, Shirley Mazinski, the bus was used when we got it. And it was probably bought on grant funds. So the Sutton director said it was kind of like constantly in the shop, always being repaired. It wasn't ADA compliant. When they did get a ramp put in, it was kind of like a pulley kind of lift ramp, so it wasn't anything automatic. The whole thing was a nightmare. So I think because of the expense of it and the constant repairs of it and the amount of work that was being put on Sutton, they just said, forget it. But was it something important? Yes. Is Sutton's going to be trying to get a bus? You know, all the senior centers need one. She said sharing the bus between the two towns was also very difficult. Because if you had Senior and Douglas that lived over near the state forest, who had an appointment in Milford at 10 o'clock, and then you had, you know what I mean? She said it was very difficult to share. You know, they were going back and forth constantly. If somebody's there for radiation or dialysis, it's a different treatment than somebody just going for a quick doctor's appointment. So it was a lot of chaos.
What do you anticipate for staffing for the bus? Because it's going to run, would it be a full day of use, or?
So we are open, right, 9 to 3, say, and then on Friday mornings. So when I was talking to the other senior center directors, most of them had said they have it during their open hours. So if somebody has an appointment that's going to end at 4 o'clock, well, they try to work with the offices and try to make it different. So, I mean, I would like to kind of have it and start kind of softly, just to, you know, maybe have it during the hours that we're open when the need is there. I wouldn't want to have somebody sitting around waiting for something, but I think when you have it, if you schedule it out a month before you put it on the road, do you see what I'm saying?
It's going to take a little time to get it up and running.
Right, of course.
I get
So
all
if we
that.
said, okay, we have a bus coming this month, whoever calls in, and, you know, also you have to do a certain amount of business hours beforehand. So, you know, could be that a bus driver part-time would be working 15 hours a week. We might need more than one bus driver because you can't, if you work more than, 19 or 20, then you're a benefited position now, so.
You may need more than one just in the event that the driver can't come in for whatever reason.
Correct.
Because once you create the service, you have to
Continuity, yes. Yep.
keep it going because it's going to mess everybody up.
Right.
Where would you store this thing?
We have a van parking spot at the senior center in the parking lot. I know that it was stored previously, it was stored in Sutton, and it was stored in their parking lot.
Yeah. The mention of a bus, what is it? Is it like a van type thing, or is it a large
Yep.
van?
So it would be an 8 to 10 passenger, handicap accessible van with regular seats, and then, of course, spots for wheelchairs and.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason why I'm asking this is I'm thinking like during the winter time when you're trying to clear the snow off the roof because you can't drive down the road like that. Just considerations. So is this something that Mr. Administrator would have to go to town meeting to create that position, or is this just get added to the budget? How does that work?
So if we sync this up to annual town meeting, the position would be put onto the compensation table and would appear in the budget. So the position would be created in the comp table, the funding would appear in the budget, and off you'd go.
Okay, so it would necessarily have to go to town meeting to create that position? Yeah, okay.
We have, our limited authority to create temporary positions in anticipation of a future vote of the town meeting, but that can only be 6 months maximum. And if there's a rate of pay associated with that, it would have to come to this board for approval until town meeting has a chance to vote it.
Yeah, because it's not in the budget as of
Right.
now, so.
So we've done this a couple times, most recently with the Board of Health part-time employee who was assigned to do contact tracing, where the position was needed immediately. I used my authority to create a temporary position and a temporary rate of pay with your approval. And then at the next town meeting, it was on the comp table. So we've been through this exercise once before, recently.
Patrice, I saw you in the parking lot. We had a brief discussion on this, and when you tell me that there's a need, I believe you. I think I was on the board that, made the decision to cut that back in the day. So I'd love to have the program back. I guess my question, Matt, is if we were to treat this like a regular budget item and go to town meeting with both the cost of the transportation, however we decide to go about that, and the staff member, is that appropriate given certain concerns about ARPA use and takebacks down the road from the federal government?
In terms of whether we treating ARPA funds as revenue replacement have adequately identified how the objectives of the ARPA program are being met by the project, I think it will sustain review. So the part that grabbed my eye as the hook, and we talked about this, Patrice, is that because we are dealing with people who cannot otherwise get themselves to seek medical care, and existing bus services don't bring them to the place where they get their care, we are directly making it possible for people to respond to the pandemic and their other healthcare needs by giving them a way to readily access Milford Hospital and the environs there. I think that's, I don't want to call it winner chicken dinner because it's not a complete slam dunk, but I think it would be a pretty cold-hearted person who wouldn't see the merits of this proposal as it fits under the ARPA template.
No, it's a valid argument.
Yeah. We get in trouble with ARPA when we go pretty far afield. So if we're going to buy the bus because we want to take kids to sports games, and that was the only reason why we were buying the bus, and say, well, that was a valid use of ARPA, well, I'm not entirely sure you could make the case that that is related to pandemic response or increasing access to healthcare or wireless or the other stated policy goals of the ARPA program. So.
Patrice, will there be a list of uses? In other words, if suppose somebody has a medical appointment in Boston, is that something that is outside the geographic scope of where you would drop people off?
I would have a really hard time, honestly, kind of limiting where people could go. What if it's a veteran who wants to go to the Veterans Hospital? So, I mean, if things are scheduled in advance, then you know it, and it's kind of a first come, first serve, right? If the bus is going to go out to Boston for an appointment, it's not going to come back and then go back again. So it wouldn't be going back and forth. It would
So
be
medical would be the first priority, but what other, suppose you get 3 people that want to go to Foxwoods, is that?
Oh, no. Medical would be a priority. We did have Peter in from is it Resonate?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, maybe you can take a field trip down to, I said, no, not in the bus.
So medical, pretty much?
Yeah. So it would be, medical would be the first priority. Food and medications would be my second priority.
Right.
Definitely coming to the senior center for a nutritional, educational, or physical fitness program, because that's really important. And I know everybody's sick to death of COVID, but that was a really hard couple of years. You know, and if you ask any of these 80 or 90-year-old people that are in my exercise classes, and they're geared for their age group, and then we have some younger ones too, they really failed during that time. And after being back for like a couple of short months, it was amazing, the amount of balance and strength they had. And So I think the socialization aspect and the physical fitness and nutritional is really important too. So those would be how I would want to prioritize them.
Prioritize, yeah.
We also have seniors that are still working, and sadly, if you saw the stats from Elderbus, a lot of them are going to Walmart or Price Chopper. I always thought if a senior was working, did they want to, or is it because they have to? So I've done a poll. I've gone to Market Basket and gone shopping and seen the 80-year-old checking me out, and I said, are you working because you want to or because you have to? I do this everywhere that I go. I've done it for years. Most are doing it because they have to. Some are doing it because maybe they're a widow or they don't have any family and they want the socialization. So I think that work, although it wouldn't be my first priority, we shouldn't really discriminate against somebody who has to go out and make a living right now because they need the extra money to pay for their oil, their gas, or anything else, or, they need for heating, or, even food.
Is
So-
somebody going to be able to say they're working 5 days a week, or they could use the bus to get there every day for that 5?
I would say it would have to be, and this is how the other centers have done it. You need a doctor's note to say that you're not capable of driving.
Right.
Or that you're disabled and you don't have a license. You can't just use the bus because it's a cheaper way for you to get to work. Or because you don't like driving at night, or in the dark,
Right.
or in the rain, or in the snow. So, I mean, there'd be a criteria for it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to really tell somebody that they can't go to work if they really need the income.
Well, it sounds like you've thought about these situations that
Yeah.
I'm thinking of now.
Yes, of course.
Would it be an all-wheel drive vehicle?
I
I'm
would
just
say,
asking
I would
because
say that
inclement weather
all
in
vehicles now
wintertime.
would be, but we would probably do, when the school closes, the senior center closes to patrons, not to staff. We only close if the town hall closes. So if there was a snow day, then the bus wouldn't be on the road, because it wouldn't be safe to do so. If we were closed for a foot of snow.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that one of the seniors, if they had a regular
Regularly scheduled appointment.
scheduled appointment, whether
Yeah.
it's dialysis or something like that,
Right.
you can't say, well, it's snowing, so you can't go today. They
No.
need to go.
No, I know. Yeah.
So that's why I asked that question.
I mean, I suppose we'd have to gauge it on what the amount of snow was. And they do reschedule things, different
Yeah.
times of the day, or, I know
It's
dialysis
just a
people do
thought.
that.
All these thoughts came out
Yeah.
since the last meeting.
Yeah.
So it's to help you, the plan as
Yeah.
to what you're gonna do.
No, that's a good thought, though.
Nobody, and it was even expressed at the last meeting, nobody's opposed to it. It'd be, like Matt just said about the audit. You'd have to be pretty cold to deny the need of this bus, but there's also planning that needs to go in place to do it.
I mean, our population is a third.
Yeah.
The senior population is a third of the population in this town. So it's not like we have 500 seniors. You know what I mean? It will definitely be utilized. We get calls, constant calls, every day. We get a call, every couple of days we'll get 2 or 3, and it's always the same thing. Most of it's Milford or, I don't want my daughter to have to take the whole day off to bring me to the eye doctor to get my eyes dilated. So things like that
Right.
come up often.
Is there special training the drivers need?
So no. I would prefer, you have to have CPR. You want to be CPR certified, I would want an AED on it, of course. I would prefer somebody with a background, CNA, home health aide, somebody who retired EMT, I don't care, somebody who has worked in the industry, because your seniors do have apparatuses, right? They might have oxygen, a wheelchair, so it would really want to be somebody who's physically fit and somebody who has some kind of a background, even if they wanted to help somebody use an EpiPen. So I would definitely want that as qualifications. I have a ton of job descriptions. I did reach out through the MCOA, and then all the directors chit-chat, and they sent me over a bunch. So it'd probably be tweaked a little bit to fit the needs of, this community, but I would certainly want them to have certain certifications. But just a regular driver's license is all they need.
Matt, can any of the ARPA funds be used for the salary for a year or something like that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Just,
Ongoing operational needs are not the purpose of the program. We're in the process of having a conversation with a different advisor for ARPA, because the advisor that we hired is now basically the part-time finance director for the town of Auburn. There's no such thing as a part-time finance
Yeah.
director for a town the size of Auburn. So I don't know that we're getting a whole lot of attention, and we need to get some
Make sure we're
advice. We
doing
need to
it
put
right.
these programs in front of somebody who's going to respond within 48 hours, not 48 days. So I'll have better answers for you once I have a chance to bring them on.
Just thinking about what you said about creating a temporary position like that, and the only problem with that is you still have to go to town meeting and have it approved, which I don't see why it wouldn't get approved, but you always have to acknowledge the possibilities. And you create something and you get these people all excited and involved in it, and then all of a sudden they don't have it. So it's just a consideration that we should think about.
I think it would almost fall into the same concept as the ARPA audit. You'd have to be pretty cold-hearted to take away a bus driver for seniors.
I understand that, but to be fair, they get a good vote. I don't feel comfortable putting somebody up against the wall with a gun to their head asking them to do something, and that's basically what you're creating when you go through that process. So I don't know, I asked Matt about this, and whether or not it could be put on the fall town meeting, and he didn't think it was appropriate to do that. The regular town meeting would be a better place for it to happen.
Well, if I got this right, just to kind of run this through my head, it is short notice to try and get a permanent position thrown up in front of town meeting. A temporary position, you have the authority to do with our approval. And then we could address in the spring, changing that from a temporary to a permanent position, at the special town meeting. Wouldn't we be able to do that?
You could do it either place. You might be more appropriate to do it at annual because it'd be part of the budget.
Yeah. But you only have a 6-month window on that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm tracking with Selectman Fitzpatrick, Mr. Chairman, is that when we buy the asset and then we put somebody in it to operate it, they should be contemporaneous, almost simultaneous events, so that the bus doesn't sit there unused for a period of time while you're waiting to get funds for the driver. The driver isn't cut out of the budget for whatever reason, and then you're left with the bus. If we had an approval in hand, so you have options, right? You can do the temporary appointment and run with this pretty much right away, or we can look at the procurement cycle and try to have that procurement land at pretty much right around town meeting, so that town meeting has the opportunity to vote the position. We have a chance to cancel the bus if for some reason the position isn't funded. So I don't want to be in the used car business. So those are your two, is how much risk you want to accept for what you think the potential vote would be. I think if you were hiring a new department head with, a salary approaching 6 digits, it would be a little bit different than a part-time bus driver. So I would weigh the probabilities would be probably favor town meeting voting it. But again, as you point out, Mr. Chairman, as Selectman Fitzpatrick points out, you don't want to presume that town meeting will vote a certain way. It's a little bit inappropriate.
I think the difficulty that you would run into is certain members of the community could balk at it just out of principle, if nothing else, not out of the real necessity of it. Just the fact that you did it that way. And it happens. At different meetings, that different people will stand up and say certain comments opposed to something, and it's not really the item, it's just how you got there. So, I don't know.
The one piece that I'm missing here, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is delivery time. So, I get the impression from the email I get from vendors that there are vehicles available. So I don't know that we'd be looking at a really long lead time, but, we don't have to pay for it until it arrives. So we could make a schedule. This kind of like, hate to sound wishy-washy, but there's almost an infinite range of options here. Really, it's just a question of what you're comfortable with and how much risk you want to accept.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you call it inappropriate?
From my position as a town administrator, I don't want to presume that the legislative body will do anything and then make spending or policy plans based on what I think town meeting is going to support. I think that's presumptuous. I didn't want to overuse the word presume in the same paragraph.
It's funny, I
But it's-
thought you could have pulled it off.
Respect for the institution means that you don't think that you know what that group is going to do.
The difficulty I have, I don't believe anything until I have it. If I go on everything that I think I'm gonna get.
I think where it puts me is just in an odd position, is that I see that there's an immediate need for this, and there has been for quite some time. And I can't possibly presume or divine what's going to come from town meeting, because, a few years ago, we all sat in this room, and I think most of us didn't think we stood a snowball's chance in Hades of ever getting a 2.5 override pass. And we did, by a narrow margin, but if I was a betting man, I would have said it would have lost. So my thought process is to Patrice's point, there's a third of the community that constitutes the senior citizens. They have a need. They've been writing to us, who's the executive branch of government in town, saying, can you help us with this need? I feel obligated to try and help. That's kind of where I sit with it. And if it's one of those things that we have to set up and debate and go back and forth at town meeting to try and discuss and value how it works, it's kind of goes the same way as almost anything else does. The people that are for it, make sure you're at town meeting. The people that are against it, make sure you're at town meeting too. That's kind of the beauty of it. But I wouldn't want to sit and just be in total pause when there's a vulnerable community in our town that we have a responsibility to that's asking us for help.
Now, I suppose one thing you could do, and the finance director and I are usually unified 100% on this issue about never entering into a lease. But we could probably approach, and this was Selectman Fitzpatrick's idea at one point, why don't we approach a vendor and say, let's have a lease with purchase
You can always
option.
buy out the vehicle.
And then if town meeting doesn't approve the position, we could walk away from the agreement with minimal financial exposure. We would no longer have the bus, and we wouldn't be carrying the bus either. But if town meeting approves the position, then we can convert the lease to a purchase, and the vendor gets their money. So they have to be willing to do it.
You still need to drive.
I think they're always willing.
Well, it would be a temporary, an employment.
Well, I know
It's the lesser of the two evils when you said it.
The advantage of the lease is then you'll have a little bit of a track record of how popular the bus is too, before we.
Yep.
my thought is when given the option of doing something or doing nothing, I always choose something. So.
You could approve this contingent on our research to see if anybody will bite at the concept of a lease.
Yeah.
Yes, Jean?
If you are thinking about going forward at this time, and even leasing a vehicle, then you really should put something on the special town meeting and not go through the option of a temporary appointment. We're close enough to town meeting, it still gives the meeting an opportunity to say yay or nay. You're not going to get it up and running before that. You need a funding source because you don't have the money in your budget to fund it, so we're going to have to put money in there anyways. It gives you an opportunity to put it on the comp chart, and you're doing it right from the start. And I think it addresses Selectman Fitzpatrick's, concern about not having town meeting's approval prior to purchasing the bus.
That works.
And you're within.
I think
town meeting's
doing it
November
any
16th.
other way than the town meeting undermines the confidence of the voting public with this board. And it's no different than what you did in creating Bob's position 2 years ago. It was at fall town meeting. About 14,000 $400.
Well, I think the assistant chief, fire chief was done at a fall town meeting too, wasn't it?
Outdoors.
Yeah.
I don't know, we had so many meetings that fall, I kind of lost track of which was which.
The meeting's so close,
The
I
warrant
would be
still-
inclined to put it on a special town meeting. That would expedite it for Teresa's needs for her department.
I mean, I certainly would have been here previous, but we were open, closed, right?
No,
And now
I
it's
got it,
like,
yep.
now that we're full on and everybody's going back out into the world, it's like, wow.
We can't fix yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
I would have put it on for last year.
Are we talking position and vehicle?
Well, I think
The
the,
vehicle will be ARPA, so that's you.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, at some point,
And we just use that as part of the explanation during the meeting, that that's how the vehicle's going to be purchased.
and for the concerns on the ARPA side of it, as long as things don't drastically change with the Commonwealth's budget, we do have a commitment from Senator Fatman. But it's not until August, I believe, of 2023, that he's able to actually secure and send the funds to us.
He's going to secure his seat in the next election.
True.
Not,
So it's a promise,
Not-
but a lot's, there's a lot that's
Yeah.
hinging on it.
yeah. But, well, if we own it and he gives you a grant, you can't use that to pay for something that you already purchased, if I'm correct in that
Depends
assumption.
on-
Sounds like double dipping if you did that.
Right.
Maybe something
So,
else.
anyway.
I will just say this, and disclaimers, you've heard them all before. I don't know if this, I feel comfortable with ARPA money with this. I mean, ARPA very specifically at one point was infrastructure. This is an ongoing need that the town has. This is something that the town budget and the townspeople should vote on up or down, and maybe a little time gets you a better program, a better vehicle, a better policy. Regionalization, I had heard that regionalization really didn't work well, but this ARPA money is not just a free-for-all. We've got $2 million, let's spend. I would have a hard time supporting it if it's ARPA.
I think the
I
issue.
felt the same way about the opera funds until tonight, when Matt started talking about the need of bringing the seniors to medical appointments and things like that, and it kind of changed my thought process on that.
I think also something to consider, Tim, is we're not the only town that's struggling and getting their heads around how ARPA works. And I think that's part of it's almost part of their special sauce with it, is that you're going to get a town that's like us or many others in the Commonwealth trying to figure out a project that fits into this ARPA formula. And then we run into, paralysis by analysis, and by the end of it, they just end up taking most of the funds back and doing what they want with them. And I think we ran into that prior with, what was the last one that came down?
CARES.
The CARES Act.
So
Is-
I just want, Mr. Chairman, be clear about how we're trying to navigate the waters. All communities receiving less than X dollars, and that includes us, right? And we're a small town. All of those funds are now being considered revenue replacement. So the prior restrictions, the restrictions in the first iteration of the ARPA regulations no longer apply in as rigid a form as they did when it was first put in place. Our advisor, Tom Zadella, said, even though it's revenue replacement, I advise that you follow the prior guidelines and find a nexus with the program so that if you get your single audit and somebody starts to ask you, what was the nexus with pandemic response or expanding services to the community, you would have that in place. You would have already thought about that. There are very few bright lines with ARPA. There's a couple of things we cannot do. We cannot pay premium pay for somebody who worked from home. That's an absolute no-no, can't be done. Capital expenses like building replacements or building repairs, not okay. But if you were going to fund this, and if it was within range to fund it with revenue, you could do that, because it's revenue replacement.
Seems to me if there's going to be a big medical component to this, to the bus, there may be some long-haul COVID people that will be able to take advantage of it. Other people may get inoculations. And the other thing is to make sure people have good medical care so they're more resistant if they're going to be hit with the virus. So I think there's a pretty good nexus between, medically, between this and the intent of the ARPA fund.
It's taking people to an inoculation clinic. We'd have to demonstrate that we're actually doing it, right? Keep good records and say we took
Yeah.
50 people over to Uxbridge for a shot. But I think if you did that, you would have met the threshold for some of the consideration.
It may not be in the perfect sweet spot, but I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's not a water pipe, right? It's not PPE. It's not low-hanging fruit. But as I said when we started, Mr. Chairman, through you to Selectman Bonin, as I said when we started, it has a stronger nexus than many other potential proposals would have. It is not a absolute golden, fits the prior thing exactly, but
The fail-safe positions, you still end up with a bus even if the ARPA funds can't be used, and it's not such a huge amount of money that's going to impinge upon anything else for the town, so.
The part that I think we're overlooking is we're talking about the ARPA. The only thing that we pulled out of that was the premium pay replacement. I would suggest that we go to town meeting, the fall town meeting, to create this position and also fund the bus, because we're still going through the process of the ARPA funds. I would assume that we're going to get to some point where we're going to have our list. Matt had a list of goals that, for the town that we want to consider. We had different proposals from different department heads that came in.
You haven't seen them all either.
And we need to go through some sort of grading system with it, I would think, to see which ones we qualify and don't qualify. The cost of the bus that you put out there, I don't think it's going to cripple us financially if we were to fund it through the town meeting process. If it didn't get funded through the ARPA, I think it would be a little aggressive to start cherry picking and putting things ARPA label on them, other than that premium pay that we did, until we go through the whole process to try to figure out how we're going to spend that money.
You know, I think it's still a relatively small amount of the ARPA funds, so it really doesn't impact other programs. And you could explain to town meeting, we think this is eligible into the ARPA, but if it wasn't, then we may have to come back to you. So if I was speaking as a town meeting, I would say that this is a pretty reasonable way of approaching it. And by the time of the town meeting, we'd probably get more input as to the guidelines for the program.
Yeah, and so my
We're
goal.
not talking $500,000 or $1 million here, so.
My goal is to try to move the discussion along, so then we can come up with a plan to move
Yeah.
forward, and instead of trying to pinpoint it down in a 30-minute conversation as, okay, we're using it for, because we have a little bit of.
Well, we should have
back and
something on
forth
the,
with that.
fall town meeting
Correct.
anyway. So I think
Yep.
there's a consensus
Yep.
on that. Exactly what it will be, we may not be sure.
We're going to have a meeting or two between now and
Yeah.
then, and if we come to a point
Yeah.
where we start moving forward on this ARPA stuff, it's easy enough to address that at town meeting at that point. Is that correct?
Kind of indifferent to the funding source as long as we fund it. That's kind of where I sit with it. I'd
Right.
just like to get the,
I think we're all on that same page, Kevin. It's just the ARPA label gets used pretty freely, and until we get to the point where we can hash out how we're going to spend that money. And I asked Matt if he could back off from December 31st, 24, come back and tell us what our drop dead date is, because we can't wait until it's to that point, because it has to be expended by then.
so do we want to make this so we're actually being fruitful in our conversation? Does it make sense to have a motion to add this as a town meeting warrant article?
The only question is what the article would say. Would it say funding as from ARPA or funding from town funds? But the driver position obviously would be there.
I think you'd want to create the position and ask for sufficient funds for fuel and pay.
You have to have at
Insurance.
least,
I'm not really worried about the insurance, and because I just, whatever adjustment we make to property casualty,
you have to amend the compensation chart to add the position. You have to fund the position through the wages of the council on aging, and you have to fund the expenses through, and then you have to purchase the vehicle. So you have at least 3 articles.
Is it feasible to have all 3 of those articles ready and prepared for town meeting?
Well, they would have to be ready, the finance committee, for your next meeting, because the finance committee is meeting the
following Tuesday.
Tuesday after that, and they have to have the recommendations at the following meeting.
Do we have it ready for that?
Yeah, that's not a complicated thing.
Anybody care to make a motion on that?
I'll move that we reserve an article at the fall town, special town meeting to authorize the creation of a bus driver position and, I guess, what, support?
Amend the compensation table
Yeah.
and purchase a vehicle.
Yeah, and purchase the vehicle. We don't have to necessarily specify where that's coming from, I think, or maybe, at least at this stage. When we get into the drafting, we probably have to.
Mr. Administrator, could I ask you to work out the details with Patrice between now and our next meeting, so you can try to answer a bunch of these
Yeah,
questions we have?
I'm still captured by the thought of how to use a lease as a device, as a bridging device.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we could lease with purchase the option and then use the ARPA funds for the purchase, assuming a consultant tells us that we're safe to do so, but that we would just need operating funds for the initial lease. I think there's, like I said, I think there's an infinite number of ways to do it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of guidance here from the board. There's plenty to chew on between now and your next meeting. The articles themselves are not difficult to draft because it's the kind of thing we do all the time. We've got plenty of these.
So we want to take a second on my
Second.
motion?
Okay. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Patrice.
Thanks, Patrice.
Have a great night.
All right. Now we have final premium pay proposal acceptance and possible votes.
So, Mr. Chairman, all I'm looking for here, this is the final, is the list in their packet?
Yes.
This is the final list. There are dollar amounts next to positions, I believe. And by group, so your memo has the groups that I created only for discussion purposes: public safety group, assigned group, group 3, which would be civilians working behind the scenes. So I think what I'm looking for is a vote to authorize me to transmit this program to the finance director for final vetting and the issuance of premium paychecks in accordance with this list and a recommendation from our ARPA advisor. Right, so I don't want to have to come back before you. This is the widest and it is the broadest drawn list that we can make of all eligible employees. As you will recall, I have asked, or I plan to ask, that the exceptions for several exempt employees be awarded and they be allowed to collect premium pay because of the duties they were assigned to and because their salary is below the cap set by ARPA. The only thing that sticks is the fact that they're exempt. I don't want to have to come back before you, so if the ARPA advisor that we hire says, actually, that's probably not going to be a winner, then I just want to revise the numbers for the remaining people in the program and issue the checks at that point without having to come back for further adjustment. You've already voted the budget, so the budget won't change. It'll be 250.
Yeah.
Is it clear what I'm asking for, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you care to make a motion on this?
Make a motion to accept Matt's final premium pay proposal.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Does that suffice, Matt? You're all good?
Yep.
Agenda item number 8 is to have a discussion regarding the second floor of the Municipal Center and possible votes. So I had asked to have that thrown on the agenda. I think Tim and I had talked about it at one point. We do have a large second floor here, and kind of a lack of space on the first floor. So I think it might be worthy to start exploring like cost benefit, what's involved in actually, or getting a kind of a cost analysis of what's really needed to build out the second floor for additional office space, moving people from the first to the second floor, all those happy things.
There's two big obstacles in your way. One of them is storage, which we have that on the Hopper proposal from the town clerk to create a storage area. She has it on it for her vault and stuff. We briefly just talked about potentially using the locker rooms in the gymnasium for that storage area. It meets her needs space-wise. Still working, she's working through that, meeting with Ryan Hogan, go over that space to see if he still needs that. The biggest obstacle you have is we had Dixon Salo, we paid him back in 2016 to do a code review for the second floor. And because of the change of use, at that time it was going from educational to office space, it's still a change of use. It requires sprinklers on the second floor. Well, sprinklers on the second floor are a problem because we don't, piping out on the road is, being the age it is, early 1900s to around 1950. You don't have the volume in it. You'll have pressure, you just won't have the volume. That was also part of our Hopper proposal from Bob Sullivan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Upgrading that line coming up the street would solve the issues that he has out there. The useful life of those pipes are normally about 70 years, is what he's telling me. But it also would enable you to bring a line into this building so you would get sufficient volume as well as pressure. So those two things are going to stop you from going upstairs until you solve that. I've talked to Matt briefly about this within the last 2 weeks, but about the potential, if it would qualify under ARPA for upgrading the water line. It would be a hard argument to deny it during an audit, considering that it's going to supply the EOC center, there's the police station downstairs. So.
Yeah, I think that the water line and pressure would probably be part of the overall costing it out, because it would probably have to go together. I mean, there's other, I would probably have to consult John. You have
Depot
some
Street
background in-
water main replacements, $2 million.
You have some background on the fire side of it. Are there alternatives to a water-based sprinkler system?
There's other sprinkler systems we can use, but I'm not familiar with the code. I don't know, maybe Ken would know better. But
Ken was hiding behind John. He didn't want to have to answer the question.
yeah. What the,
Yeah, he wore the same color shirt, so he blended in like his chair.
Yeah, he's like a chair back there.
Sit like
So I
that.
defer to you, Ken.
There is other systems available. We'd have to research into which ones would be adequate for that space above. They do have chemical systems and all that. I could do some research into it and see what I can come up with.
Doesn't have PFAS in it, does it?
Don't do that. So I'm looking at Adam. We have a 4-inch service
We
net.
have a 4-inch line that comes into this building through the front lawn, comes in, and that's our domestic water and our fire suppression, which is not allowed anymore.
No, they're supposed to be
Back in-
separate.
Yeah, in 96 when they did it, it was allowed, it's not anymore. So that has to be changed if you're gonna touch any of this. You have to change that. You'll put a 6-inch pipe in for fire suppression, at minimum 6, and then probably a 2-inch line that comes in here for domestic.
Was that the 2 million proposed?
So that's Bob Sullivan's water line coming up here. I don't know what he has for this building alone. That's just gonna bring, we need a bigger water line coming up the street in order to feed the 6-inch that we want for this building. So it kind of ties together. I did have a price that I'll have to go back when I first started, I think 2013, from RH White to do just the pipe in the front lawn, and I really want to say it was probably around 100 and some odd thousand, 150,000, somewhere in that area, just for our part of it, but it still doesn't guarantee what's in the street. So you really want to do the street and then have the flow, because you don't know how tight that pipe is with all the tuberculation and everything closing it up, so.
When I talked to Bob Sullivan, he said that his water line replacement did include renewing the service.
But I assume we'd need backflow prevention,
Yeah, correct.
so that will take
Yeah.
space downstairs. And we'll have to, Mr. Chairman, talk to Bob Sullivan about what that 2 million entailed, because it's the entire line up Depot Street was a 1906
Correct.
installation. There's nothing that says we have to go all the way to the end of Depot. We could,
He said it was done in 2 phases. One was early 1900s, the second phase was around 1950. But he did say that the average life is about 70 years, so even the 1950 is
yeah.
at the end of it.
If you don't do the whole thing, then you may be connecting to garbage, which is
Exactly,
not a
especially
good thing.
if it loops like everything does, going up Franklin Street, coming down Railroad and coming down. So you're still gonna have the same issue.
But getting back to the earlier point, Mr. Chairman, you know the little game we used to all have in the car when we go to the beach or whatever, New Hampshire? This little plastic thing was a puzzle, and you had to move the pieces around, and you eventually ended up with Santa Claus or something else on this little plastic puzzle. That's what this is. We have so much paper upstairs. The bloody second floor is gonna fall on our heads before we fix the damn thing, right? And, you know, Ken has already put this forward. A full review of everything we have, where we stand with document retention, what has to be here, what doesn't have to be here. And then those locker rooms in the gym, frankly, you couldn't design a better vault almost from scratch, right? You're gonna brick in the windows, you're gonna put climate control in there, it's up off the ground, and take your most pressing and most important documents and put them in there. You may be disposing of some, you may be able to create electronic copies of those that are eligible to be disposed of, so you're not really truly getting rid of it, getting rid of the paper, but you'd be saving it electronically. All of that costs money. But until we actually find a place to slide that first piece of the puzzle over, we're stuck. And, you know, the ideal time to have a conversation about full reuse of the second floor is when the two issues are resolved. Water service to the building, because I don't think we're going to win a sprinkler fight. At this point, it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we might have had almost a fighting chance, but not anymore, I don't think. So we'll end up having a sprinkle up there, and then there's just so much. Did you count how many file cabinets are? I don't know.
There's a lot. Nike bad.
Well, bulk storage, you have 2 huge safes in Gene's room that would be out of it.
Is there an opportunity to use a service like Iron Mountain that
Oh, sure.
does document management just
Yeah,
to?
Conica does it, everybody does it. right? And I'm sure there's a statewide contract with all of those firms on it. You just have to arrive at a budget that's a function of the number of documents you want to save and how you want to do it. I know we talked about trying to get an existing town employee who has a background in archiving to project lead it.
Talking years to do it.
It's going to take years to do it.
It's like a large expense to create space for storage.
Well, the flip side of it is,
Unless there's,
all of your opportunity cost, you have this building and you don't use the second floor.
Yeah.
But you heat it,
right.
right? The lights are on up there.
But there's
so
a big incremental cost to be able to use.
Better than building a new building.
Yeah, that's true, but
Yeah, I mean, the two big hurdles, like one, both are manageable, it's just understanding a budget behind it. Like knowing that it's a $2 million project out into the street, we do need to sprinkle the second floor, but there may be alternatives as opposed to water sprinkled using a chemical-based solution. And then offloading these documents off-site and using a data management company to do it, because I know, like, for example, Iron Mountain, half of their thing is they'll take your documentation, they'll scan it for you, they'll put it into a cloud-based container for you, and you're all said and done.
Getting a handle on what all of this would cost is proactive, so it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
You come into the budget process with numbers associated with ideas so you can pick and choose, as opposed to trying to make it up as you go along.
The other piece to it, Hal, we're bursting at the seams on the first floor, right? There's a lot of growth in the town, space needed, office space and otherwise. So it would be more than just the archives, but archives would be important.
It's a snowball effect. You stop the storage thing, you gotta free up all that space over there. You gotta free up Gene's office, you gotta free up a lot of stuff that's in the hallways here, and it's just, the stuff's scattered everywhere. Right now, when town clerk does their voting, all that equipment goes right back upstairs again. Adam has to bring it up there. Where that would reduce the need of the employees of that if she could just wheel it to the door and put it back in her room.
And Mr. Chairman, for my part, I'm concerned about the physical security of some sensitive documents in other assets. So whether it's payroll records or personnel records, they need to be behind a locked door and access controlled, and nobody is able to get to them. And in order to get to them, they shouldn't be in the room with the server. Just saying.
No, that's bad.
So our existing arrangement works, right? It's functional, but it doesn't meet any best practices at all to co-locate records in the IT room. It's just as a matter of accident. I bump into a switch. Oh, that light's blinking now. It wasn't before. What's that doing? And the police call and say, we just lost the internet. What's going on?
Well, it's also the point, we have all of these paper-based documents, and I can't imagine, we probably don't have a fraction that are electronic compared to what we have. In the event there was ever a fire in this building, it's all gone.
But as you know,
Yeah, there's no sprinkler.
That too.
as you know, a lot of those records have to be retained forever because Selectman Cortez, God bless his soul, would sometimes represent people seeking pension information years after they left the service of a specific town. So you might have to dig back 25, 20 years to find payroll records to back up someone's claim. And you have to have them. You have to meet that, so.
But it was primarily why I'd put it on here, not so much for office space, but start thinking forward of how do we start making better use out of the space that we have? And then what do we do about records management? Because I'm sure Jean would like to see something other than a large safe sitting in her office.
And the men's room door, yes.
Yes.
It's a goal of mine.
To one day not have to see the men's room door?
I heard Royal Caribbean was offering cruises where you could go buy men's room doors.
People pay a premium.
People would pay for that if there's the right entertainment. No, it's really, no employee should have to be near anybody's restroom.
All right.
Okay, move on.
Discussion, new highway barn, next steps and possible votes. That was the other big one that's kind of been sitting. I know it's currently, all the needs assessments have been sent over to the building and
Building
facilities.
Facilities, Shirley's here, they have a meeting tomorrow, the walkthrough with the police department. Is their final walkthrough, is that correct, Shirley?
Yes.
Can I just ask what the conclusion on number 8 was?
On number 8,
I mean, it was discussed. What action would you like the administration to take?
well, I know, I'm sorry, good point. I know Ken is going to look into an alternate sprinkler solution. I personally would like to see, try and get some cost estimates on getting some of this documentation, using a service as opposed to trying to find a town employee to do it. Because for one person, even with a background in archiving, you're looking at years.
Yeah, many years. All right.
But there's a reason for that, too. I mean, it's one thing to scan a document and have the file name say scan 10/22/666, and no one's ever going to find it. So I dismiss local knowledge of what they're looking at either. But
Could be a combination somehow, working together.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those, if you use the services to do it, to get it scanned, and then find a place where they're going to store it, they're still going to be working with your town clerk, your finance director, and things like that, so it's actually archived in an intelligent way that's easy for people to get a hold of.
And since it's come up, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say one thing. It is not a disorganized mess. So town residents, senior work-off employees have worked really, really hard to organize all those files up there.
There's
So
just a lot of them.
there's a lot of them,
Yeah.
but they're not coming over, it's a file with papers hanging out there. Everything's been organized and at least put in the proper file folder, so the contractor would take that, hopefully create the same name, right? And keep the documents together in the same folder. But I want to give the seniors who've been up there working credit, because they've really put in a lot of hours. And they've gotten rid of a lot of stuff we don't need. But
It's still a
it
lot of
accrues
stuff.
rapidly, yeah.
And this goes back to the previous comment when Patrice was here talking about the bus use of the use of the opera fund. We have so many things, and now we're off of that, and we're on to this one. Now we're passionate about this particular thing, and this is what's important, that we step back for a second and get everything together so we can properly score it. I know Ken had, he came to Capitol for a document scanner, and I think you wanted somebody, actually, some help to do that as well. You had a document scanner, a large format scanner, and
Large format scanner, and then a computer station set up there to be able to do small document, large document scan, and be able to utilize whatever you can take, scan in, the rest, if it doesn't need to be saved, can be shredded.
so it's something that we started talking about, but we need to move forward somehow or another to get this storage under control.
And then there's the whole concept on digital storage. Once
Yeah.
we've actually taken those documents
Yeah.
and scanned them, like our current Microsoft environment, do we have enough storage available in the cloud to actually move that up to?
We do, that's for sure. But Ken, your original intent was what? To build a street file, right? So you want to go back and get the old building permits and plans and whatnot, and marry them to
Street,
e-permitting.
address on the street, and everything that's correspondent with that address on the street is right there in the file.
Nice.
There are, like in, I think behind that door over there, there's certain things that we cannot scan and get rid of, you have to keep. And that's
Oh, yeah.
the ancient books or whatever they are. You'd have to bring Chris in here and ask her that stuff. But there are certain things that cannot be scanned and discarded, you have to keep them. So that's what the importance of that storage area is, as well as the payroll record, the employee records or whatever it is that Matt needs to secure.
I originally.
Sorry to derail you, but I wrote down what you said, so I think we have
Yep.
a work plan from that item.
No, my apologies for kind of
That's all right.
getting distracted on it.
So, back to, do you need a vote or anything on that, or are we good?
I think we understand what we need to do.
Okay. So, the building and facilities,
Building and facilities, Shirley, probably be proper for her to speak on it.
Yeah, you want to
as
come up,
what the
Shirley?
process would be.
No, just that what Mike said, tomorrow afternoon, 4 o'clock, we're in meeting in the police department and listening to what their needs are, even though we have booklets that came from, a report came from a committee that Mike chaired. And we've met with the highway department, we've met with the fire department. It's all on tape.
Yes.
I actually watched the fire department one, Shirley.
Okay, good. And I felt that it would be a good thing for people if they would tune in, because it shows the needs that are there for all the departments and hopefully for the police department. So we're looking forward to meeting with them tomorrow. And then we have to have a discussion and see what we're going to recommend to the Board of Selectmen to move forward.
Do you figure a couple of meetings for that, or
Probably.
probably?
Tomorrow's meeting, basically, we end up leaving everything else that we're supposed to, excuse me, follow up with, and just zero in on Highway Barn. Adam gave us a good tour, and the fire department, and we'll do the same with the police department. And then review what we've learned, what does the committee want to recommend, and we also have other stuff on our plate that needs to be addressed.
Okay. That works?
They were in good shape.
Okay.
Yeah, they're almost done with what they're doing, so we should be seeing pretty soon, and then we have the board decide where we'll put it. Does it necessarily have to go back to capital? If we, assuming it gets to that stage, would it go back to capital, or would it become a warrant article from this board?
If I may, actually, our charge came from the Board of Selectmen, but where it goes, it may have to go, I don't know, back to capital.
Right, it would come, you
Depending on
you
what
would
we
send your
recommend.
recommendation back to the Board of Selectmen. So
Yeah.
my question is does the Board of Selectmen send it to capital or send it directly to a warrant article?
I think we,
Reach that
Probably
point.
the latter, but probably could appear on both.
I think we would probably do it as us. I don't think it would go back to capital. I think that we'd submit it as a warrant article, because I think the first step that we'd want to do would be to raise and appropriate the funds to secure a architectural firm or whoever it is to actually present us with a design. And then, once we have that, I think it would kick back to capital once there's an actual
Yeah,
building.
that would be part of the recommendation from the building facilities to whether it goes to design or.
Yeah. But I think the first part where it's actually services, I don't know if that would be a capital item. Once we have the cost on, this is what a building's gonna cost, then I think we would kick it back to capital. My opinion, but we can confirm that with council.
How has the town dealt with designer services in the past?
Special article.
Special article. So it doesn't have to go on capital. It can be your article.
I don't think it needs to go on capital, but I'm just asking, just so we're thinking of it ahead of time so we can get that out of the
It
way.
may have an impact on what the capital committee is authorized to spend,
Started a trend.
right?
With my permission.
All right. I'm gonna excuse myself for one
Thank you,
second to use
Shirley.
the restroom. Hal started the trend. So,
So you want me to pay attention this time?
yeah, could you?
What? Well, you didn't say nothing last meeting. I may,
We'll go to item 10, which is the review warrant articles. I'll be right back.
Before we begin, November 14th, 16th is a Wednesday. I think. Any reason why we're doing that on a Wednesday,
what are we talking about?
the town meeting?
Oh.
High school already has it booked, that Tuesday, parent-teacher conference, something was going on with that. They couldn't reschedule.
I think that was exactly it. I think it was parent-teacher conference night.
And, no, they probably do it Monday and Tuesday? All right. It's a little tricky, given the meatiness of this town meeting. All right. Fair warned.
Any of these warrant articles, you need any explanation on that? Pretty straightforward. See this first one, the easement, and the second one being the sloping. Yeah.
So the first bullet point, the release, the National Grid electrical easement on the parcel is not necessary. So Rich Bowen has opined that that does not trigger a town meeting vote, because you're actually, you're getting a benefit, the property's becoming unburdened, you're not acquiring a new interest in
Yeah.
real estate, so that's not necessary. But the second bullet point is necessary. Go ahead and explain it if you want. But you will recall that you granted CRG a license to do some sloping on town property in order to, as part of their driveway construction. The driveway itself would be on their property, but they needed to slope a little bit over towards ours. That needs to be converted into an easement that will run with the land, because the slope is going to be permanent, so the easement needs to be permanent. The license was just to get us to
That was
town meeting.
That was temporary, as there was insufficient time to get to a town meeting, so that was temporary Band-Aid patch right there.
Well, it allowed the closing to proceed on their side.
Well, that's sort of a no-brainer.
Yeah, the second bullet point is really non-monetary. It's just taking converting a temporary into a permanent easement. Does everybody have this map? The colored map?
I think that came to us this afternoon.
Yeah, it's in the third page.
If you look at the overlap, that's where the red easement overlaps the green grading and sloping easement. That 98 feet is what's always been in question. That's what's creating all these problems. Because the access road is 20 to sometimes 40 feet below the elevation of that land in Uxbridge, it's requiring a sizable slope. And the slope extends into our town-owned parcel in Uxbridge, which is indicated by the green shaded area. As that elevation rises, the slope gets longer.
The other piece of news here, and I do want to keep us moving along through the list, Mr. Chairman. The other piece of news here is that usually when Grid extinguishes an easement, they get financial compensation in return by a formula. They've come up with the figures, and CRG is going to donate the cost to the town, and the town will use the donation account to pay Grid. So there'll be no cost to the taxpayer for the extinguishment of the easements.
Nice.
It's very cheeky of Grid to insist on this, but they do. It's like 25 grand. It's not.
This says that the 25,591 was sent directly to them.
The check is going directly to them. What you need to do is vote to accept the donation.
Well, I haven't seen any further email traffic. As far as I'm concerned, whether that check was sent or not, doesn't have to be cashed. The proper process is for that to be a donation account restricted to the specific use, and then Grid will invoice the town will pay them. Because it all has to be documented that way.
Right.
If Rich had a different opinion later in the day, I'm not aware.
That was later. John Vignone asked directly,
I know he did. I know he asked. I don't know what the answer was.
and Rich said yes.
Okay. So if town council has opined that it is acceptable for the check to be sent directly, I don't know how we book that, but
Yeah, the
Who will
email
read
I
questions?
have is John Vignone asked Rich Bowen, may the selectmen vote to accept the gift of payment for the release and CRG pay National Grid directly? Rich's response was yes, gifts aren't subject to the appropriation process. They need only be used for the donative intent.
so, but the thing is, it's not on the agenda for tonight. So it was originally conceived of as an article that would have to be on town meeting. Now it doesn't have to be. So I would think that the acceptance of the gift would have to be on your next agenda.
Which still gives us enough time anyway.
Other than that, we have, Mr. Chairman, we have the highway superintendent is still here to go over a couple of these items, and Matt Benoit is still waiting on the line here.
All right.
Okay, I assume the easement is done.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So is John here for the South Street drainage improvements
Yep.
and sidewalk? Hello again, John.
Hello again. So I don't know if we want to, Matt Benoit's been involved in this as well. I don't know if we want to let him start and then I can go from there, or... You hear us, Matt?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Good evening, members of the board. Matt Benoit, Community Development Director. Sorry for remote participation, but the days of COVID, there's still this. Otherwise, I'd be there with you this evening. Which one would you like me to discuss?
Well, we're starting on South Street.
So South Street, we received an estimate from Stantec for some stormwater control issues on that street. There's some, as you know, cross-country drainage, no easements on South Street. South Street has been on John's list of roads to be paved for quite some time, and in fact, it was actually considered for this year. But through some communication with some of the area residents on South Street, we determined that there were some drainage issues that needed to be addressed before we were just to go over and repave the road as is. So the study and the request for funding is to have these drainage measures designed and constructed with the budget generally provided us by Stantec in the amount of, I believe it was $45,000.
They're not building anything, they're just designing
Just
the
design.
drain.
Yeah. I'll go from there if I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 10 culverts down there from like 179 South Street, where it's Thomas Circle, all the way down to Hemlock Street. So these were put in the 50s. They're all old metal pipes. As Matt said, we have no easements on paper from anyone. You know, all along there, the water flows under the road and onto private property, but 60 or 70% of it is storm water. Some leaches out of the west side of South Street underneath the road and continues on. So we were scheduled to pave this year when early spring, this was all brought to our attention. That's how we ended up paving the roads that we're going to start next week. So this is our first step. If we can get the 45,000, get this engineered with Stantec, we met with them out there. They're going to survey the area, give us their recommendations, and put a package together to get this drainage work done. So this is just the beginning stages of the engineering phase of it.
Okay.
Is this pools of water in someone's front yard, or is this problematic to the structure itself?
Both. Yeah, the structures are old metal pipes that will have to be replaced. There's 10 that cross the road in that section. They'll have to be replaced, and then we need a place to put this water.
Right.
Other than someone's yard.
Correct.
Seems like a good use of $45,000 to me.
And then our goal is if we get this done and drainage done, this will be one of the next roads that we plan to pave. It's like a $600,000 paving project as of right now, just the paving alone. When we get to that point.
Any other questions on the South Street drainage? Okay, so we can move to the Route 16 sidewalk and possible votes.
Do the same thing, Matt?
Sure.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, the Route 16 sidewalk project has been on and off your radar since, and forgive me, obviously, I've only been here since last October, but it was a 2008 town meeting warrant article to appropriate funds for a study and design of the sidewalk, extending it from points that you have before you. There were also this was also spearheaded, at least contributed by some residents that are actually on the call here this evening. I asked them to join us in case you had any questions about the history, some of the stuff that I don't know how to answer, have not been here. But what we've uncovered here is, not only is this a sidewalk construction project, but this turned out to be a major stormwater project as well. And you'll see the estimate provided to you was for a significant amount of money, with a contingency, fully knowing that this project wouldn't be reached for a couple of years. I think there's folks here, John included, and some of the residents to be able to answer more questions about this than I, but we did get the final design, and these are the numbers that came from it. And I will say, we also held a public meeting with some of the neighbors who provided feedback with the design consultant at the time, and so they agreed with the design as presented. Just recently put the final concept. So the town meeting request, I believe, includes a 30% contingency, fully knowing that this could be scheduled out for a couple of years.
And I could give you some of the highlights if you'd like.
Yeah, please, John.
Okay. So this will be about 700 feet of sidewalk from Sunset Drive all the way down to past Franklin Street, connecting the sidewalk in front of, I believe, house number 164. There'll be 4 new catch basins installed for drainage, 500 feet of curbing, some retaining walls, because if you're familiar with the area, there's some slope issues that we got to hold back. Also, the entrance and exit to Sunset Drive as well as Franklin Street will be redone. And the house at the corner of Franklin in Main Street, because of the slopes. On Sunset, none of the stormwater is getting into the drains there. That road was built by a developer many years ago that went out of business, never really finished the road the way it should have been. So the water is missing the drains at the bottom of the hill, coming right out onto Main Street, heading down Main Street. The driveway on the corner of Franklin and Main, Ken can tell you that we have to do some work there to meet the ADA compliance. Because it's a sidewalk, you have to have the certain rules and regs. Ken knows them like the back of his hand, he could tell you. And the same thing with Franklin Street. The slope of Franklin, if you think about it when you drive by how steep it is, we got to cut back, flatten it down, narrow it up some, so we can get the right pitch and grade for a handicap accessible. So that's, you know, the total project price, I believe it was $383, but that's a 30% contingency because they're thinking we're not going to get to it for a year or two when the prices are going to be up there. So They've checked the drainage. Stantec did when they did this report for us with cameras underneath Main Street. The drainage itself is good, but we just need to relocate some of the structures there because they're going to be right in the way of the sidewalk. There's a couple of drop inlets that the sidewalk would have to go right through, so we have to move some drains and what have you, and it's a pretty expensive sidewalk for 700 feet of sidewalk, you know, $383,000, but it's a safety issue with the people walking from Sunset or walking from downtown to get up to Sunset. So I don't know if you want to let the residents speak on it, or maybe they have different input than I did.
See, we got a couple of folks on there. Yes, so. Would either one of you folks like? I'm trying to see, I can't read the names from here.
Did you ask if the residents want to speak on this?
Yeah.
Okay. You can see my camera. You can see, I don't have a visual of anybody there. I don't know. This is Matt from Menard from Main Street.
How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well, thank you. I just had a question or clarification. It's going to be another couple of years.
I think he's asking if it's going to be another couple of years before we do this, or?
Well, we have to get the money appropriated, and then the contingency is for a few years out. If the money's voted on, obviously, our goal would be to get right on it. But the engineers put in the estimate an extra 30% contingency just because it could take that long, and if it does, the prices are up there. That's all. If we get the money voted sooner, we'd go right to work on it.
Okay, thank you for that. The only other thing I had was it was shared that this has been the council has been seeing this. I think it was brought up first in 2008, and my understanding is that there were funds already aside for it over 5 years ago. So I know there obviously wasn't $300,000. It's just frustrating to get this being put up for another couple of years, seeing that funds have already been set aside a long time ago, and I'm just curious if it will ever actually come into a reality.
Well, the funds that were set aside, Matt, is what we used to do the design, and that's how we funded that. So right now, there's $0 left in the account after we got this designed. So I wasn't in charge of this project when it was first put into play, so, you know, I'm not sure about what happened then, but, you know, here we are now, so.
So then based off of, you know, to your point, John, if it's a successful town meeting article and it passes and we can raise and appropriate those funds, you'd start to work on it as
Probably
soon
in the
as you
spring.
can. Yeah.
Yeah, we put it out to bid and what have you, and if it was funded, and get going on it like any other project.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one expense that was unforeseen. We actually had to hire someone to do a camera drop through some of the infrastructure that we had over there to assess its condition. Just an example of some of the costs that we weren't foreseeing initially when this project was looking at undertaken. I think it was an extra $7,000 or $8,000 just to get that reviewed. Obviously, as soon as you get in the ground, you start finding things. So this was one of those expenses that went towards design that we weren't expecting.
Thanks, Matt.
Although it did yield good results.
Excellent. Does that address your concern, sir?
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. For clarity, the original, back in 08, and going forward from there, I was under the impression that the funds set aside were for the completion of the project. So you're telling me the funds set aside were only for just to do an estimate to get into it? It wasn't for the actual project?
I can help you with that, John, if you want. So back in 08, when that was originally funded at town meeting, that was just based on a per square footage cost of sidewalk replacement only. Then when the project was evaluated, they ran into all these issues that arose for handicap accessibility, the drainage, and the end result is you need retaining walls, and it escalated the cost. And from '08 until now, we did have some challenges, so we couldn't increase that budget. So here we are today, and it's been properly addressed and designed, so now it will
So
move
if we
forward.
hold the group by the vote, did I hear a year from now, or what was the estimated time completion?
So if this goes through town meeting and it gets approved at town meeting to raise and appropriate the funds, John would be looking to do this starting in the spring.
Sure, we put it out to bid as soon as we could, so they could put the shovel in the ground in the spring, if that's...
Once Stantec has their design done, so they can give it to John. Because he's at the mercy
Gotcha,
of,
okay.
he's at the mercy of Stantec, so he can't go any faster than what they give him the paper.
Yeah, Gene?
I just want to clarify one thing. You keep saying raise and appropriate. This would probably be a transfer from free cash.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Gene.
Okay. Sorry. It's a little asterisk, sorry.
You were making a twitch.
Yeah. At least I didn't say found money, Gene, so I'm doing all right.
The other gentleman.
Yeah, the gentleman raising his hand?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, sorry. Lewis here from 3 Franklin Street. I'm the multifamily, the white and blue house up there on the corner where they say some of the slope issues are going on. And I heard someone speaking about how it was 700 feet of sidewalk, and obviously it's a lot of money that we're talking about here, but someone else brought up a good point that I wanted to stress, and that was the safety aspect of it. I see everything going on up and down Main Street all day long, and I personally have 5 kids here at the house. So not having a sidewalk there personally causes safety concerns for me and my children, tenants, and their kids, etc., because the kids like to go meet up with the other kids from the neighborhood. They like to ride bikes, and I find my son going down the driveway, taking a right down Main Street, and he's right there, and cars are flying by him. So, not just as far as my children go, just everyone in general. I see people walking down Main Street. They don't have a sidewalk. They're kind of crammed up there on the edge. Sometimes I see kids crossing the street, and there's just all kinds of stuff going on over there. So that was my main concern, and that's why I've been part of the meetings for the safety aspect of it. Like I said, for me, my family, but everyone as well who's walking up and down Main Street on a daily basis, which happens a lot. So, yeah, that's about all my feedback. Like I said, I get into the safety concerns and everything going on over there, and I intend on living here and staying around Douglas for a long time. So it just make me and everyone else feel much more comfortable, regardless of the expenses, and which I understand completely. I'm a construction worker myself, but I just wanted to give everybody my piece on that as far as that went.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, move ahead.
Yeah.
Put a bow on that issue. I got caught running down Franklin in a rainstorm, a monsoon, and they ran out of a sidewalk, and I was probably running in 3 inches, no exaggeration, 3 inches of heavy runoff. So I think this is a great project. Let's get this done.
Absolutely. All right. Move on to amend zoning bylaw, section 10 definitions.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Mr. Frazier.
Good evening, gentlemen.
All right. So what do you want to tell us about the,
I don't have that paper.
Yeah.
Just to,
You can read it, Ken.
this is a proposal for, in accordance to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5, Planning Board, Douglas Planning Board, meeting dated September 8th, voted unanimously in favor, recommended the following Douglas zoning bylaw to the Board of Selectmen consideration. To see if Section 10 of the Douglas zoning bylaw as follows: building height measurement shall be based on the average finished grade elevation within 5 feet of the structure to the highest point of the structure, or take any other action there.
Yeah, I got a question.
I figured.
What classifies the highest point? You know what I'm asking that for? Chimneys, cupolas, I'm not talking about turrets or anything like that, but are you going to consider a chimney or a turret, because a chimney has to be 2 feet over the ridge, right?
Typically, the highest height, or elevation of height, is considered to the ridge of the roof of the structure.
Yeah, and I'm just so it's clear to people that are going to vote on this.
We call that almost like an ancillary part to the structure.
Is this cleanup language from previous action?
Yes.
Yes.
Because right now we have, it just, all the zoning bylaw says is maximum height 35 feet, maximum stories 2.5 stories.
Yeah,
So,
no way to interpret that.
Well, everybody has a different interpretation.
yeah.
Right.
It all depends what the meaning of 35 is, right?
I have a project right now that, you know, I measured from the top of the foundation on the drawings to the top of the ridge, and it's 39 feet. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't have done an average around, and they would have been in compliance for the 35 feet.
It would be hard to do, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this one?
No.
No. All right. Adopt zoning bylaw, section 6.8, solar bylaw, impossible votes?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Please don't read them.
be happy to address this one for the group.
All righty.
Thank you. So the Douglas Planning Board at its meeting of September 8th, voted 6-1 in favor to recommend the following Douglas zoning bylaw to the select board for consideration for the 2022 fall town meeting. This is to adopt section 6.8 of the Douglas zoning bylaws to incorporate a solar bylaw into the community. The board, I'm sure, remember seeing this on a previous town meeting. The way that went was there were changes proposed by the planning board at a public hearing that was too late for the moderator to consider at the floor town meeting. So this was tabled to this town meeting, which the changes that the planning board wished to incorporate at that time have also been incorporated now. And the bylaws should be in its finished form, ready for town meeting at this time. Happy to answer any questions.
So, in summation on the solar bylaw, is this going to, is it predominantly, what does this do or impact on a commercial-based solar farm that may want to do business in Douglas?
This would be actually quite positive for commercial-based solar. It doesn't restrict it to particular zones. It has a helpful frontage requirement, only requiring 60 feet. It also has some nice setback pieces also, but the big piece, one of the issues we were having before with some of the other case laws and state for solar, as we know, as part of the Dover Amendment, is that our planning board did not want to restrict commercial solar from being normally developed. And they felt that the way that they wrote this bylaw leaves it wide open for commercial and welcomes commercial solar into the town.
My only question.
Did this go to town council?
through the chair to Mr. Fitzpatrick. This bylaw has been reviewed by town council on numerous occasions. So all we did was actually, when the planning board made changes at their April meeting back in before May town meeting, town council had a chance to look at that as well and had reviewed it at that time. I haven't put it back in front of council in the past month because this is the same draft we're working on. They reviewed previously.
You've condensed it as much as you can? Like, you got 14 pages, I'm just looking, it seems like a lot of pages for a bylaw. I didn't read through the whole thing.
Yeah, we're working off the state template and try to incorporate many of the sections that are in that template. We did remove a few that did not apply to the town of Douglas, but we did do our best. We know it's lengthy, but it is similar to a lot of other communities.
So there was more than 14 pages prior?
But it's been, yes. Did very well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Shirley
Yes.
Mazinski, 60 Oak Street. I'd like to ask Matt, did the planning board hold another hearing on this bylaw? Because there was quite an issue at the town meeting regarding a change, and I believe it was the distance or the opening, and it was quite a large opening to the entrance, if I'm not mistaken, to get into a solar farm. And I think that was the issue of the change. And are they going to hold a hearing?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to address Ms. Mazinski?
Yes, please.
Thank you. To the chair. This is just the first step in the process. It has to come from a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen for the planning board to hold a public hearing, which if they were to get a vote of the Selectmen this evening, they will then schedule a public hearing, which is hoping to be the second week of October.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Shirley?
Yes.
Are there any other questions on this? Do you want to make a motion?
Just one.
Yes.
You had said that it was, don't worry, Matt, I won't ask too many. You said that it was consistent with the surrounding towns. Is it the best fit for this town?
In my opinion, through the chair, I believe so. And there were some components here that made it pretty restrictive for a lot of communities. And a lot of towns that they use this model don't have as much forest and as much state land as the town of Douglas. So some of those pieces I communicated with some of my friends and colleagues in Mass Audubon for some of the language that had been kicked back through case law and stuff. We had to pull some of those things out, which actually makes it better for the town of Douglas. It depends on how you look at it. So I think it's a really good fit, to use my own opinion to answer your question, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for, is your opinion. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on it? If you'd be looking for this to move to a hearing status, we need to make a motion and approve it tonight.
I don't know that you approve it, you refer it to the planning board for their recommendation.
Would you care to make a motion to refer this one to the planning board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Point of order, if you don't mind, we actually need a similar vote for the previous item that Mr. Fisher spoke about, as it is a zoning bylaw issue. Also requires a public hearing.
Just reading this top part here of the cover page of this. Did you read that? The very
Which
first
one?
paragraph.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that, it goes back to the planning board. It just, they voted 6-1 in favor to recommend to the Douglas zoning bylaw to the Board of Selectmen for consideration on the fall town meeting.
Yeah.
So are we voting just to put it onto the fall town meeting?
No, they made took a shortcut there, but we're kicking it back to them.
But it's all matter who has the right of initiative.
Yep,
And there's lots of ways to get zoning changes.
yep.
So any zoning change has to come to the select board, be referred to the planning board for a public hearing. And that recommendation vote of the planning board must be presented at town meeting as part of the presentation of the bylaw change. In this particular instance, the planning board on its own initiative is sending you a proposal. They voted to send the proposal to you for inclusion on the warrant. You refer it back to them now. for
Yeah, I
the-
just
for the
making
hearing.
sure that it was clear, because of the way that was
Yeah.
written, and that there was a little confusion as the last time this went, so I would just want to make sure
Yeah.
that we all understand how it goes.
All right.
Thank you.
And we need a similar motion on section 10 definitions?
Yep.
Make a motion to refer back to the planning board, the definition, the proposed definition on building height.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And would it make sense to discuss these in conjunction? Because we have remove zoning bylaw, section 6.1, earth removal, and then adopt general bylaw, article 12, earth removal, and possible votes. Sounds like they're kind of hand in hand. Getting rid of one, substituting with another.
Well,
Indeed.
this would be referred back to them as well, correct?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's how it works, but not to overcomplicate a bowl of spaghetti here. Right. To put it in a nutshell, you would be the overall project is to remove the earth removal section of the zoning bylaw, which would require a 2/3 vote of town meeting.
Okay?
Replace it with a bylaw that can be adopted by a simple majority of town meeting. As drafted, there is a number of changes. There's a change to the amount of earth that can be moved around and sold and moved off property, the quantity, but there's an important change suggested that the permit would be issued by the select board and not the planning board. It's almost like you'd be issuing a business license as opposed to using the existing earth removal permit process, which goes through the planning board. That's a fairly substantial regulatory change. Just want to make sure you know that that's what this is about. Now, you don't have to accept the role of being responsible for the earth removal permit. You could leave it with the planning board. You could change the language as you see fit. But as it's coming to you from staff, it's coming to you with the select board being the issuing authority on the theory that this is a business like the other businesses that you, as the select board, regulate. So the interaction over hours of operation and other limitations are in a similar vein. It's totally different product, totally different industry, right? But we typically would recommend that select boards deal with business regulation, planning boards stick to the land use component. And in the case of earth removal, it is a business, it is a commercial operation to take a resource and sell it into the marketplace.
Why it's with us.
That's the thought process, that it could reside here if you chose to accept that responsibility. I think the way it's drafted.
That was
You
the
could also
recommendation
create a
of town
committee.
council as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
You could also create a committee to advise you on it, which could be the planning board.
So these two don't need to go back for public hearing, do they?
Well, I think technically you are changing the zoning code, so it would go back to the planning board for their opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I would send it back to them.
All right.
Make a motion to, on both items, remove the zoning bylaw, section 6.1, earth removal, as well as adopt the general bylaw, article 12, earth removal, refer them back to the planning.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then public road acceptance, Cobblestone Lane and Meeting House Lane for annual town meeting and possible votes.
Only have one question.
Yeah.
Are the meets and bounds in on those roads? You sure about that?
He's grinning.
Through the chair, yes. I'm glad you asked that question, actually.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll ask.
I understand of the history with the town of Douglas with bounds and getting those installed in one subdivision. So through this process, a majority of Cobblestone Lane and some of the associated roads within this development known as Stonegate have already been accepted as public ways in the community of Douglas as recently as 8. The last 2 cul-de-sacs here, which we're talking about this evening, have been done for some time, but back in March, the request came in to put this out for town meeting acceptance. We engaged Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering to go out and take a look at the site, and he identified some concerns, and some of those concerns were the locations of the bounds that didn't appear to be on site. So the call it the developer, but more along the lines of the son of the developer who inherited the project. I don't know if he's there with you this evening, he's in the audience, but he did the work that we asked, had the bonds installed, in addition to some other work that needed to be done. And we brought our engineer back out there maybe 3 weeks ago, who confirmed that the work was completed as instructed. So these cul-de-sacs are ready for town meeting acceptance. It's just, we run into a little bit of a snafu with the Solar Bylaw. And the way it reads is, so long as it's brought to the select board prior to October 1st, it can be considered for the annual town meeting warrant. So despite wanting to get on for a special town meeting here this November, the general bylaw reads, we need to have this to you by now for consideration at annual town meeting. I guess part of my request is, and I understand it's still up to the board, but that these are the last 10% or 15% of a subdivision development that's already been accepted at town meeting. And these have been vetted by our engineer and our professionals and signed off by myself, the highway department, et cetera. I was curious what if the board would consider putting this on for a special town meeting.
No issues with drainage or retention ponds or anything like that up there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that question.
No issues with drainage or retention ponds or anything up there? I'm just making sure that we don't end up with another problem, that's all.
I'm glad you asked. Through the chair, that was one of the issues that was identified back in March that had been remediated in August. There was a lot of growth in the largest detention basin at the end of Cobblestone Road, the extension piece, and a lot of that growth had been removed satisfactory to our.
Thank you.
That's it. Anybody have any issues with adding this to the special town meeting?
Given the beefy nature of the special town meeting, I don't see this as being particularly troublesome.
No, I don't either.
Beefy.
Okay to make a motion to add it to the, or just, we don't really have to make a motion, it's just there, isn't it? Or do you need a formal action?
I think you do. So I hate to be a pain. In Article 5, Section 3 of the general bylaws, all private ways to be accepted by the town must be petitioned for not later than October 1st in each year for submission to the next ensuing annual town meeting. So personally, I don't really know the answer to whether or not you can put this on special town meeting by a vote of the select board or whether you have to follow the bylaw. I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for the developer's son here because we're holding a bond, a fairly substantial amount of money, and he's done, right? He has absolutely completed everything to the town's satisfaction. So my inclination is to recommend to you to put this on special town meeting. If someone objects, town council will be there to opine as to whether or not it can go forward. But at this point, you know, it'd be different if this was a slipshod project and there were a lot of things that were undone and the town was being left holding the bag and there was no surety left, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, all the experts have been out there, everything's been observed, that it's been built to spec, and now what's the reason to sit on this person's money for several months when we already know the answer to the substantive questions? So I had to flag the issue for you so you know what you're getting into, but I think staff feels like this has been a very compliant applicant for relief, and be ashamed to make him wait 6 months for, how much is it, Matt?
I think it was about 60,000.
Yeah.
What's the form of surety?
I think it's approximately 60,000.
But what's the form of surety? Is it cash?
Excuse me.
Yeah, so it's cash.
Can we do it contingent upon council's approval?
You can leave it on the warrant now, and we'll
Yeah.
just, we can bring it to Rich.
Yeah. All right, let's do that.
Do you
I'll
need a
move
form?
we place on the special town meeting, the public road acceptance of Cobblestone Lane and Meeting House Lane.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, well, we've reviewed the warrant, and we want to close it, right?
You want to keep it open for
Hold on, we got a last-minute entry.
No more entries from Bob.
native dancers.
Bob gets what he
in the fifth
wants.
race is an
I don't know
entry.
who that guy
Use
we
pink
had
highlighter, Bob.
already,
It's
but
not on
he's
the
been
agenda,
fired
that's what I was
and
talking about.
moved him
It's not
by
on the agenda for action.
9
So it
o'clock.
has to be on the next. It doesn't change what they're doing.
And it's a pink highlighter, Bob. We don't do anything on pink highlighted stuff.
Can I make a motion not to allow Bob to approach after 9 o'clock?
Yes.
Is that daylight savings time?
Can I put a follow-up motion that we actually have him bound and gagged prior to 9 o'clock?
I got tape in the truck.
All right, then.
All the painters tape you could ever want. It's blue. Nothing.
So, Matt, because we are pending an article on, well, the 3 articles that are coming up regarding the bus, the driver and stuff, do we leave the warrant open? Or we reopen it, add those, then close it again?
You know, form over substance, right? You can leave it open. I don't think you have to close it by any particular time. With 14 days before the town meeting.
We close before the finance committee gets it, though. Your meeting.
We have
before
one
they-
meeting.
So we can leave it open until the next meeting?
Yeah,
What are all these highlighted things on here?
where?
Those, not yet.
They're not what?
They're for me. They're markers for me for more information needed. No, that's your copy.
Gene, to
She
your,
said it was for her.
we've got one meeting left?
Yeah.
Yeah, October 4th,
Okay.
and then the finance committee gets it October 11th.
Why don't we just leave it open until the 4th?
Yeah.
All right.
Cases.
Yeah, because there's still a blanket increase building department wages by XXXXX.
XXXXX,
Yeah,
that's a
no, we can
lot.
add to that. We're just closing that meeting. We're not going to add any more
Except
stuff.
any more articles.
Okay. Moving on to approving minutes and possible votes.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, good night. Enjoy your
Thank you.
commute.
Enjoy your commute.
Make a motion that we approve the August 2 meeting minutes.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Make a motion that we approve the August 16th minutes. Second?
I'll second it. How's that? Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Your report, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the hour, I'll try to be quick. It was brought to all of our attention today that the spouse of a businessman here in town has passed away after a long battle with an illness. And our heart goes out to Ray Whitehead and his family, the loss of his wife. Ray has been very, very helpful recently with lots of things. He's always been a very big supporter of the town and town government, and he's helped us set up a fuel card system using his facility and joining the Sourcewell network and the WEX network to be able to support the town's operations. It's very convenient for us to have fire and highway across the street, being able to fuel up during storms and just as a matter of convenience. So I don't know Ray very well personally, but we've all lost close members of our family. I think we can express sympathy and empathy for his condition right now and wish him well as he mourns and tries to recover from this loss. Secondly, I also saw the obituary today for someone who may not be very well known in Douglas, but if you are very partisan for the Blackstone River Valley and its heritage as an industrial center for the country, and recognize that importance has risen to the point where parts of this are a national park now. It's hard not to note the passing of Morris Nathanson, an architect from the city of Pawtucket, who has been instrumental over the course of many years using, I hate the word visionary, but the man truly was a visionary. He was able to look at an old stone mill building and see the beauty of its construction, the elegance of its lines. And he put his money where his mouth is. When he came back to Rhode Island, he bought an old cardboard factory in Pawtucket, restored it, made it his architectural and artist studio and lofts for businesses. Morris was 95 years old. I worked closely with him in trying to think through the reuse of a lot of the old buildings in Woonsocket, where I was the economic development director. He was a fantastic individual. He had experienced a great deal of anti-Semitism in his life and had spent most of his adult life trying to fight against that particular trend. He was a founding member of so many things, Pawtucket Foundation, and did everything from designing small business storefronts in Pawtucket to designing 11 prize-winning interior designs for Walt Disney World. So was really an accomplished person, had a huge influence on the course of the restoration of historic buildings around the Blackstone Valley. So his loss is pretty significant. Lastly, just because it's a personal note, the horrible story out of the city of Woonsocket, the passing of Mayor Menard, and the conditions of finding her alone at home, undiscovered for quite some time. Susan Menard, Mr. Chairman, as you know, was a very colorful person. You didn't fight with Susan without making sure you had armor on your front and your back.
And feet.
Nevertheless, she was a strong female figure in elective politics going back many, many years to a time when it was hard for women to run for office and be successful. And she was on the school committee, city council, and eventually mayor for 14 years, the longest serving mayor in the city of Woonsocket. Obviously, she affected my life in many ways. So just it'd be hard to have her pass and not say anything about her career and what she was able to accomplish. She did, bold in a China shop fashion, accomplish a number of significant building rehabs and other changes to the city, not all of which were positive.
She certainly knew how to whip up military presence at
at a parade.
At a parade, right quick.
So that's that. I didn't want to belabor those points, but the human side of things, I will be out of town for the next, for Thursday and Friday, so I will follow my usual process of giving you written notice that Chief Miglianico will serve as the go-to person while I'm out of pocket for those 2 days. I'll be back in the office on Monday. We are working diligently to get ready for town meeting and filling in a lot of the missing numbers or extra details that need to be added so that we're prepared for the Finance Committee's action on October 11th. We are also preparing for September 29th hearing before the Department of Public Utilities regarding the extension of natural gas service into the town of Douglas by Eversource. A similar franchise petition has not been filed at the DPU for over 50 years. So leave it to the town of Douglas to turn historic firsts. This project has encountered virtually every bureaucratic necessity that you could possibly imagine. But it is a fact that under the law, Eversource cannot run gas pipes into the town of Douglas unless it has lawful authorization to do so. The petition was filed by Eversource. The Attorney General's office, as you all probably well know, in the world of utility regulation, the Attorney General's office represents the consumers, the customers of Eversource, the pre-existing customers, and all future customer interests should the petition go forward in the town of Douglas. Therefore, they have filed a routine intervener. They are intervening in the case in order to be able to ask questions during the evidentiary hearing at 2 o'clock on September 29th. It has been recommended that town officials, to the extent that they can, attend in person, so Bob and Eric and I most certainly will be going, probably dragging Matt Benoit along, but any select board member. It is imperative that we submit as much testimony on behalf of our point of view as is possible. So rather than necessarily penning a single single piece of testimony to be signed by the entire select board as well as town officials, we're going to submit one set of testimony, but we're encouraging members of the board to submit your own or testify live on your own in order to beef up the presence of the town, which needs to be heard. I did meet, along with Bob and Eric and Matt Benoit, with the relevant attorneys in the Attorney General's office. Was actually, I don't want to say flattered, but reasonably impressed by the level of policy staff as well as legal staff that was assigned to meet with us that day. There was the entire gamut of the Attorney General's utility office, consumer protection office was there. They have their point of view, right? So the policy folks are pretty far out there with some specific questions about renewables and what alternatives that were considered instead of fossil fuel gas. But the attorneys are a little bit more practical. They know that the petition will be decided on its merits, and it's on the fast track because we're really talking about 1,600 feet of gas pipe into the town. I just want to make a couple of points on the record here that I intend to testify about so you know that what's coming. One of the things is this project, while it's entirely, we put our blinders on and we look at it, this is only the town of Douglas, we're building a couple of buildings, we're putting a gas pipe in to service them. The reality is the trends in the American economy and the things that need to be done in order to reach certain environmental goals involve more efficient distribution of goods around the country, utilizing our highway system and properly designed warehouses. And to the extent that a facility is last mile, just think about this. If you have a truck that delivers product to 50 homes, you have saved 50 people from making a trip to a retail outlet to buy the same goods. So in the grand scheme of the universe, if you will, or the earth at least, cutting back on all those vehicle trips and getting more efficient distribution of goods to the public is part of achieving a net zero goal, if that is your goal. Because eventually, those delivery trucks will be powered by electricity, and all of the emissions involved in delivering goods to people will be minimized to a great extent. That's the bigger picture issue. The local issues are, this is a cross-docking facility, so the doors are going to be open and closed, open and closed. It is not exactly the ultimate paradigm of great energy efficiency. It's designed to move goods, not to seal up the building tight, and then just prevent it from using much energy. So our primary line of argument here is the town of Douglas has certain fiscal constraints. Over half of our taxable real estate in town is taxed below its full value because it is either a forest or in Chapter 61 or a quote-unquote unbuildable portion of an existing building lot. So if you have a 16-acre parcel, you're taxed at the full value of your building envelope, your building lot, and the rest of your land in the back is taxed at the open space, the open land value, which is less, a good deal less. When you add all that up, it explains the fiscal condition of the town and why we need economic development. There just isn't that much property left to generate taxable resources for the town to build its fiscal strength to the point where it can outperform or even compete with other municipalities. When I went through all of the comparison tables of other towns similarly situated to Douglas, a couple things jumped out. We have a higher proportion of debt than many other towns our size that don't have gas, and a larger portion of our budget goes to education than any other town similarly situated. So we've got to make these decision makers understand the importance of this for the town of Douglas and why they can't just leave us as an island. Last thing I'll say about this, I took a map, I left it over at my table, I'm not going to look at it. But if you color in all the towns that don't have gas, they're all contiguous to each other, and almost all of them are in western Massachusetts, or the islands, obviously the islands, right? But there's little Douglas sitting there all by itself. All the towns around us have gas. We don't. And then we're the only town that's like that. Of the 91 towns that don't have natural gas service, we're the only one that has all of our neighbors around us has the service, and we don't. So it puts us at a disadvantage competing for quote-unquote pad-ready sites and attracting national-scale businesses. Because if you don't provide gas, you don't provide an efficient way for them to heat and cool their building, you're not in the game. So that's what we're preparing for. There's a lot of work that's going into it because we're trying to document and support everything we say, not just going to assert with a written word. We're going to lots of documented sources for our information. So that's the core of what we've been going after. I guess by way of good news, I will say that all of the building permits and other things have been issued for the public safety radio program. I know the permits have been issued doesn't mean the crews are on the rigging crews are up there, but that we've taken, this is as far as we can take it. And now it is a matter of performance by Marcus Communications to finish the project quickly. I consider it to be very good news that the rooftop units that we had ordered for this building, because town meeting approved the funds, and we were down to one of 4 units working, and it was on its last legs because the heat exchanger is chuck wad. The 2 replacement units actually have already arrived at the crane yard. So the install is now being scheduled for October 3rd. So we will actually have 2 brand new units to warm the second floor of this building before the really cold weather gets here, and that's very good news for us, because I think we were looking at
So the new pipe
4 to 6
put in,
months.
it won't freeze.
Well, the pipes that we have can't, right? Because that would just be a disaster. So I think we've averted a crisis on that one. September 22nd, we will open the bids for the sewer project. That's the federally funded portion of the project up Gilboa Street, Northeast Maine. We cannot award that contract until all of the paperwork requirements of the federal government have been met. We've submitted everything to them. It's now a question, but we need their final approval before the contractor can be awarded a contract. So we will have a low bidder identified on the 22nd. We probably won't award the contract for a week or 2 after that. Any other questions or concerns at this point, Mr. Chairman? If there's not, I'm finished with this report.
If the contract comes lower than expected, any savings go back to the EDA or for the project, or do we use it for anything else?
Well, of the like 10,000 pages they sent us to read,
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of attention paid to that issue.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit, there seemed to be conflicting signals. It seems that under certain circumstances, the EDA will exercise discretion and return any unused funds to the local municipalities' match. Right? But there are other places where they say unused funds will be returned to the EDA. I think what it's saying is they have discretion on how they're going to parse it out.
Hopefully, we have to worry about that.
Hopefully, we can worry about that when the time comes.
Did you say you want individual letters for this?
I would encourage members of the board to take your own tack on the issue and submit a letter. My one call out there is, this, just the project itself, the construction, will create a lot of jobs. So if there are, nobody's watching at 9:30, but if the word gets around to folks who are engaged in the trades, whether it's plumbing, electricity, construction, this is a pretty big opportunity to have a job that's going to last you 6 months to a year, working outside, getting the thing built. So I would hope that folks who have a chance of getting a job here will be as vocal as those of us who want it here for the revenue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any open session topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting? Bob, stay seated.
Do
No,
not
I don't have
approach the
anything.
bench.
Okay, so we're off to your
Hey,
motion.
Bob has his finger in the air.
The floor,
3rd, hold that date.
what's that?
October 3rd.
October 3rd, hold that
Groundbreaking.
date.
We can, yes. I got the email on that. Thank you.
The encrypted email.
Yes.
All right, I would make a motion that we move into executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining, then to leave executive session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Second.
Made and seconded. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Fitzpatrick, aye.
On and aye.
Morris, aye.
Davis, aye.